Now, I want to share a reality check on the true state of employment in this country. Just ignore that 7.4% figure today. Ignore that. It is the worst unemployment rate in 22 years, but it's also meaningless because, as the Treasurer has already conceded, effectively it's almost double that, close enough to 14%. They tell us today that almost 1 million people are unemployed. That's the worst number since we began calculating that kind of data in 1978. The worst, of course, since the Depression. But just ignore that number as well, because when you take into account those who have given up looking for a job, the 1 million that they've tabulated today, and then those on JobKeeper, some of whom won't be parachuted back into work, that's the cliff up ahead, we have in excess of 2 million Australians unemployed. And look at what one of our biggest universities announced today. 500 will be sacked at UNSW. Of course, like all tertiary institutions, if they didn't put all their eggs in one Chinese basket, they might have avoided that sort of carnage. But they're all in the same boat. And depending on what happens in Victoria, this is all just a runaway train with, at the moment, no brakes. Victoria's predicament is preventing the government's hope for the start of a recovery before the end of the year. You can forget that. And that is why today, for the very first time during this pandemic, the Prime Minister mentioned the Q word.
So you're talking about, hundreds of thousands of more people unemployed for a start, and other businesses closed and livelihoods destroyed. And then you've got to weigh that up against what it actually achieves. Let's not forget that in Victoria they had the hardest lockdowns of everybody. And theirs is the state that has succumbed to that outbreak. And the outbreak was initiated by a failure in hotel quarantine.
He doesn't need to wait for an inquiry into quarantine procedures or lack thereof like Chairman Dan. ScoMo knows what's killing this country right now and who done it. We've all said plenty this week and the previous week about how bad the handling of this has been by the Andrews government. But in New South Wales, I think we might be witnessing the signs of another major bungle. I so hope I'm wrong. But New South Wales Health, the ones who starred in the handling of the Ruby Princess, are refusing to use CCTV footage to trace the behaviour of COVID-19 carriers at more than 20 venues where infected patrons spent time last week. Now, many of these venues, which have had to close and clean their premises, they want to help. They've offered to give the tracing investigators CCTV footage. How helpful would that be? You could see the person that you know now is infected, see the behaviour of that person, how close they came to others. You'd think they'd dive on it. But in what needs to be called out as one of the most damaging cases of political correctness in this pandemic, maybe apart from Vic Health allowing people not to be tested, the health department is refusing to use the footage for privacy reasons. Isn't saving lives more important than one or two narcs who may or may not whinge about their faces being seen and only being seen by tracing investigators at the most? I just think this is madness. When we walk into these places, we see the cameras. We know the publicans have access to that vision. It's like during times of heightened terrorism. The public must lose some degree of civil liberty for the safety of themselves and, of course, the rest of the community. Let's hope this doesn't slow down the tracing process, although, will we ever know the truth? The Health Minister should be telling his underlings and lawyers, who are obviously in their ears, who haven't been hurt by COVID-19, mind you, that this is a state of emergency. In a pandemic, you use all the weapons at your disposal, don't you? Start using them.